the voice behind the viral comedy, bold commentary, and truth-packed interviews that cut through the chaos. Author, brand creator, proud conservative Christian, this is Elsa Kurt. Welcome to the show that always brings bold faith, real truth, and no apologies.
Well, hey, my friends, welcome for a very special interview, special episode. We're going to have Lori Longfritz on. So here's the backstory. In March of 2002, U.S. Air Force Combat Controller John Chapman was left behind on a mountaintop in Afghanistan. He was wounded, alone, and surrounded, and he continued to fight for over an hour to protect the very teammates who had unknowingly retreated without him. He died saving lives that day, and for years, that part of the story remained buried, disputed, and in some circles, deliberately ignored. It took 16 years, a mountain of evidence, and the unrelenting advocacy of his family, especially his sister Lori, for the truth to be formally recognized. In 2018, John Chapman was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor.
We're gathered together this afternoon to pay tribute to a fallen warrior, a great warrior, Technical Sergeant John Chapman, and to award him our nation's highest and most revered military honor.
But as Lori will tell you, that wasn't the end of the fight. And in many ways, it was just the beginning. So join me in welcoming Lori with us today. Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Elsa. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, it's such an incredible story. And, I really want to start by saying thank you to John, of course, and to your family for, a sacrifice that so many of us are so fortunate to not ever have to experience. So we thank you for that. And we're sorry for that, for your family, for what they've gone through and what they're still going through, what you're going through.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
We never expected it really either, because John was just growing up, and I don't want to say he never failed at anything, but if he struggled with something, he pushed through until he made it. And we didn't know what combat control was. We had no idea most of what he was doing in that capacity. So I think for most of us, if not all of us, we just assumed that he would always be fine, and so we never thought we would be, the ones getting the knock on the door. So.
Yeah, I would imagine that, you would have never imagined yourself being in the spotlight, so to speak, and doing what you're doing. It changed everybody's lives in your family and in so many different ways, I'm sure.
Yeah, it sure did. It changed all of us, and we initially, when it all happened, my mom and I were the only ones left in Windsor Locks. And, we tried to be private. Like, we didn't want to do interviews and things, but we were basically told, well, if you don't do interviews, then we'll just come up with whatever we want to say. We'll interview someone who may have known him for 5 minutes, or, something along those lines. So, we were almost pretty much forced into, giving interviews and, and exposing our pain right there in front of everybody. So, I thought that was kind of crappy, but
yeah, it absolutely is. And and I rant about this regularly, about the behavior of mainstream media and so-called journalists, and and all of these people. The integrity of all of it has declined to to just a deplorable degree. And I'm sorry your family experienced that too. I want to ask you, so many of us who know John's story, we know him as a hero. Like, that is our only understanding and knowledge of him. I would love, if you wouldn't mind, could you share a moment that kind of shows who he was? And I love I've seen some things you've said about him. Tell us a little bit about John, the brother, the guy, the son, the friend. What was he like?
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have?
As
we grew up in this, 70s, basically, 70s, 80s. And, back in a time where I think even adults wouldn't insist on the kids accepting everybody for, whatever they brought to the table, whether, and John was ahead of his time in that he didn't care if it was cool to be seen with a certain person, or, he had a lot of compassion for most people. He would stand up against bullies for, kids who couldn't defend themselves. We had a neighbor, family friends. They're our family, and they had a handicapped daughter. And just even at 12 years old, John would just disappear. We'd all be playing outside and he'd just disappear. And we'd find him inside the house playing with Mary because she couldn't come outside. She had a lot of mobility issues and things like that. So, he would just disappear and go play with her. And, he was that kind of kid. And I don't know, I'm sure I've told this story before. It started way back, from the time he was probably born, because my mom said that before he could really talk much at all, if he saw her upset, he would just walk up to her and cup her face and say, "It's okay, mommy." He just had that compassion in him. He stood up to a kindergarten bully when they were all in kindergarten. It was the very first day of school, and I got this story from little Billy. Billy was new to this town, and it was before school started. And Billy says, "I must have said something to piss off Maureen Walsh," and she punched me in the stomach, and she wound up to punch me again. And this kid stepped in the way, and it was John. They were all 5 years old. So at 5 years old, John stepped in front of, it was like, that's just who he was. Wow. And he was funny, a smart ass. What a smart ass. But just a great guy. I don't want to, all of my siblings were just great people, but we're talking about John here. So yeah, he was just, he didn't, I don't think he had like a lot of inner circle friends, but when he pulled you in, it meant, he really saw something in you, or he wanted you near him. And so he did have some really good friends there growing up. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. I would imagine that so many people after his passing came and shared stories that's probably, if there's ever anything good to come from such a tragedy, is that, because we don't just randomly share great memories of people with each other, right? And when something like this happens, it triggers all of those memories, and people are so kind to share those memories so that you get to have them as well. Is that something that happened a lot? Did you get a lot of stories that you never knew?
Absolutely. It happened a lot. So I just self-published a book after Alone at Dawn. I have Alone at Dawn first, so my co-author. I just self-published first there. The life and legacy of American hero, Master Sergeant John Chapman. It's a mouthful, but kind of had to be. But in that book, I tell about a lot of the stories that came out after he was killed, and stories that even went back all the way to, one of them was when he was around 9 years old, that somebody just held on to for all those years, and then felt, as a mom, I need to share this with his mom. And, so there's a lot of these stories that came out in, after he was killed that I included in there. And I'm repeating myself now, but
you're fine. Yeah. You're fine.
So yeah, there were lots of, even I think Billy was one of the ones that, he told me that story, and I think in 2016, it's just.
Those pictures on the cover are such a treasure, and I would imagine there's so many, like every family of that era. Now it's all on their phone. They got to scroll their phone to find them. But we're so blessed to have those actual albums and physical pictures you can hold in your hand and look at, and they're such treasures now, I'm sure, more than ever. Since we're talking about the books, tell me a little bit more about that one. I'm so curious about that actual writing process of it, because I'm sure it had to be such a mixed bag of emotions, the sadness, so tell me a little bit about the best parts about writing this book for you, and if you're willing to share one of the most difficult parts of it.
First there. So that was the book I originally wanted to write, right out of the gate. As soon as Johnny was gone, I said, he can't just be a footnote in history. Especially that's how they were telling it initially. And so I wanted to write a book, and it took me 15 years to even, I would start and stop because I had no idea what I was doing.
Sure.
And, and then I got connected with my co-author from Alone at Dawn, Dan, and, with a partner, it changed my view, my vision changed entirely, which is the way it needed to happen that way. But so eventually, after after Alone at Dawn came out in 2019, I started kind of working on that again with my husband, kind of encouragement, like, hey, when are you going to sit down and when are you going to keep doing this? So, and I had already talked to a lot of his brothers in arms there to get stories about him because, I don't know combat control. I didn't know what happened in his training or anything after training. So a lot of them were very gracious enough to sit down with me and give me some stories or email me something. And so that it was really fun to see John from that perspective, because I knew him growing up. I knew him personally, but I didn't know him in the job, basically.
Sure.
And so it was a lot of fun to hear those stories and just to hear how much they respected him, how much he had a lot of bona fides. He'd walk in the room and, I'm not saying every room, but, and a lot of people would say, oh, he's with Chappie, so he's good,
Chappie, that was his nickname.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was even his nickname growing up with his friends. And, but yeah, that's what I think after he died, some of the guys were even like, oh yeah, his name is John. Like they didn't really know, they just called him Chappie, So,
yeah.
But so it was really, I think the best part was just hearing stories from other people, that I hadn't heard before, or, even some things from my family members that I hadn't heard before, or they, clarified it, it brought it more to life, for me and hopefully in the book for everyone who reads it. But yeah.
That's a beautiful thing to have done for your own sake, really. That's probably first and foremost for you, your family, John's friends, the people that knew him, and then to extend that to us, for us to get to know him, to know these things about him. So, what a wonderful thing to have done to keep his legacy and his memory alive. I think that's so great. And as an author, I totally, fiction and nonfiction, so I totally get everything that you're saying about that process and everything that goes into it and all of those things. Did have those books given you any kind of bug? I'm just out of curiosity, this is a random sideways question here. Does it give you a bug for
continuing?
more writing?
Oh yeah, I've always liked writing. I've never, I think from here on out, I'll never write nonfiction again. Mm-hmm. But I have some ideas swirling around in my head about, for fiction.
That's exciting. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. We mentioned the other book with Dan Schilling. Let's talk about this one a little bit. This one actually came out first, you said, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the process of that, what we can find inside there too.
So the process was I had never written a book before, so everything was new to me. The process was, it was interesting. It was challenging at times. Dan is a very strong personality. He was a combat controller too. They're all type A,
Yes.
And Dan could pretty much sell, ice to Eskimos. So, it was definitely interesting, and I learned a lot of very valuable lessons. And we went through our issues, but I think we were able to work through them and produce a really good book. It was a New York Times bestseller.
Yes.
And so it's basically no one's ever heard of Air Force combat control, or at least maybe back then they didn't, and even people in the Air Force hadn't heard of it, or at least didn't know much about it. And so we kind of give the background on how it kind of started. The pipeline is the longest and hardest of any of whether you're looking at Delta, SEALs, whatever, it's the longest of all of them, because combat controllers, and there may be only one per group, have to integrate with they have to integrate with the SEALs and the Delta and the, SAS and all these even foreign entities. So they have to know, they have to be prepared to be able to integrate with each one. It could be day to day, week to week, or hour to hour. You don't know. You have to be able to just pivot and fit right in. So theirs is longest and hardest. So we talk about that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Dan is the one who did all that, because I wouldn't have a clue what John went through in the pipeline. And John it wasn't easy for him. That was the first time when I was learning about even combat control myself. I didn't know about combat control until after he died. Mm-hmm. So in writing that book, I learned a lot more than I had before that. And I mean, I was so impressed with John, even more so after learning what they have to go through and what they have to know and what they have to do and have to know like high level math. I'm like, high level math, he did, in high school, he probably had average grades, I never, so I was like, wow, little brother, I'm pretty impressed with this. So it was nice to find out that stuff, but we explained that, and then we kind of go in, and there are some little stories about John interspersed throughout, just to kind of connect where John was when this combat control was growing. And then we, talk about the battle, and I have a chapter in there at the end that's strictly on the Medal of Honor ceremony in 2018. So yeah.
Yeah, the book is a really fascinating blend of like the tactical and the personal. Like it's such a great balancing act between the two, and you get both of those perspectives really, so what you're getting on the personal side, and then marrying that with all of that tactical stuff. It's like it's almost overwhelming, right? For like just learning all of that, going, wow, there's just so much encapsulated in all of this. And of course you mentioned the battle, so I think it's a great time to go into that. So if you could, and feel free to kind of like just summarize it for everyone, just the timeline and the events of what happened, so we can kind of go into what happens next.
So the timeline was there was this big the Shiakat Valley. They were all the military. They were all going to be. There was just going to be this big, massive. Let's sweep through here and get stuff done. Well, the combat controllers had to find higher ground. So from there, they could call in airstrikes, and they could see the valley and know where to do that. So there had to be, they had to find places to land and things like that. So John's group, he was embedded with a SEAL Team 6 team, and they didn't have to go into the mission. They already had people in place. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. It was a poorly planned, unnecessary mission that the SEALs pushed because they thought that Bin Laden was there and that they were going to get the kill. The ultimate get down to the brass tacks. They wanted their, we're so wonderful, be able to raise their flag over his body. And but they didn't need to go there. It wasn't a mission that had to happen that night. 2 other SEAL team leaders were given the mission, and they said, no, we're not doing that. And then John's team leader, and I usually say leader, but that's just me, because I've gone through this for so many years. I've gotten very cynical, but so he accepted it, and he did try to push it for 24 hours. And the leadership said, no, we need to get in it now. We need to get in the fight. And so they went, and they had helicopter issues and things like that. And so initially they're supposed to land at the base of the mountain and work their way up and be surprised that they went up there. So because of the helicopter issues and whatnot, it was delayed for hours. And so the best thing they came up with was to land on the top of the mountain in a Chinook. Everybody knew they were coming. There's no way to hide that, the sound of it, the massive, it's huge. And so and they knew the enemy was there. They were told prior to that the enemy was up there, and they just decided to cowboy it. And it's like, well, we're SEALs, and, they'll run because they know it's us, and they didn't, so they were attacked as soon as they were trying to land. The back was already open, and one of the SEALs, somebody else had fallen out, and he was tethered. That guy was tethered. So Neil Roberts tried to pull him back in, and in the push-pull of trying to bring someone back in, and he wasn't tethered. The guy, he ended up being pulled out. Wow. And they were taking RPGs. So the pilot, not knowing what was going on in the back, said, we got to get out of here, and left. So they left Neil there, and he was ultimately executed within, I don't forget how many, I don't know, 20, could be 20, 40 minutes. I don't know. I know he did, try to kill them, but that he was surrounded. But so anyway, once they crash landed, they said, well, we have to go back and get Neil. And John they wanted to leave John with the crew of the fallen helicopter, the downed helicopter. And John was like, no, I'm on the team. I'm coming with you. But then there were still more delays because they brought in another helicopter, and that pilot said, "Oh no, I'm not going back up there right now. We need to go back and whatever." So there were still more delays. And so then when they went back the second time and they did the same thing, they're going to land right there where they tried to land before and expecting different, whatever results. And they landed. Normally the controller is the last one out from what I understand at this point, because it was all ad hoc and they just wanted to go find Neil. The team leader went out first, post hold into their knee to thigh deep snow. And so he post hold and fell on his face, and John stepped over him, and they were taking fire from, 2 bunkers. So he attacked. You're supposed to attack your attacker. So he went right after the first bunker and killed those 2 guys, took over the bunker. Basically there was all that. Then at some point in time, he and the team leader went to, and the other guys had come out and kind of spread out. Then John went to the second bunker. At some point in time, he was hit, and that's when the team leader split off and met up with the other guys, and they were like, "Where's Chappie?" And, "Oh, he's dead," but he never checked him. So I can't, the guys on the mountain were like, "Okay, well, now we have to go with what we were just told." So he told them, "Chappie's dead." And so then they egressed, and but not far, because they could still hear I'm blowing through all this, skipping a lot. But John came to after maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes. I don't know how long. And started fighting with the they tried to, attack him with whatever they had. So the team leader had admitted that he heard what was going on up on the mountain. And these guys are elite. They know the different reports from, different weapons. And so there's no way he didn't know that was an American weapon. They tried to push it off as it was red on red, where the enemy were fighting each other, were shooting at each other. But this time it was daylight. It was dawn, which is like alone at dawn, but the sun was coming up, and these guys had been on the mountain for weeks, months, maybe even years. So they knew each other. They weren't going to be fighting each other. And then he said, "Well, it must've been them celebrating." And I'm like, that's fine. They might celebrate for like 5 minutes. They're not going to celebrate for over an hour, and then in his infinite wisdom, to protect himself and the team, he called in airstrikes. Having heard the firefight going on there, he called in airstrikes. So not only is John handling being fired at RPGs, hand-to-hand combat, he had to kill a couple guys with hand-to-hand combat. Now he's being bombed by his own munitions, and even just the concussive impacts that he had to have been taking, I can't even imagine. So ultimately they called in for QRF, the Quick Reaction Force. John had gotten into the bunker. He had been shot, stabbed, he had all kinds of wounds, shrapnel, whatever, and he was in there, and I know he heard the helicopter. He knew the helicopter, the QRF, the third one, was coming up there, and he actually had to have seen it also, and he could have stayed in the bunker and just prayed that he didn't bleed out and that he would be saved. But instead he knew that the enemy wanted that bunker from which to shoot like RPGs and the Dishka machine gun. And he left cover so that he could lay down suppressive fire for the incoming QRF. Unfortunately, some of the guys were shot as soon as they left the ramp. But John's actions, actually probably saved all of them on that QRF. And then after that, he was killed right after he laid prone to try to I think he was shooting at the Dish machine gun, and then somebody, got a shot that ended up killing him.
Wow. The horror and also pride that in him, of course, that you and your family had to have been feeling at hearing all of this, because that is a lot. That is a lot to envision. That's a lot to hear. That's a lot to process. I can't even fathom how that must have felt for your family. How long from the time that John was killed was it before you actually got the full story? And did you and your family already suspect there were things? Like, what was that timeline where things kind of started evolving into something different, where you had to question?
So immediately after it all happened, we were basically told they landed on the mountain, he killed 2 people, and he was shot and killed. So basically, like bing, bang, boom, he's done, and he's now a footnote. And we all, I mean, I haven't talked to my sister and my brother about what their feeling was. But I know my mom and I were like, there's something more to this. There has to be something more. Yes, especially my mom, because she wanted to know from his commander, did he suffer? Did he die immediately? And she was told he died immediately, which is true. He died immediately with that last shot, but he didn't, he lived for an hour and a half, or hour and 20 minutes after they left him. Now, I'm not saying that the commander knew that at the time, right after it happened. I don't know. But, and then it was just like in trickles, like, we talked, because my husband was the first sergeant of that unit.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
Yeah, that's how I met him, was through John's death. But, so we still had that connection in there. If I had just been a sister with no connection to the unit at all, I don't know if we would have known half of this stuff. I don't know. But people started saying, hey, there's no way, this is wrong. People within the community saying, Chappie didn't die right away. And because there was another combat controller on another mountain after the SEALs left, and John came up on the radio, and then he had a specific, a combat controller specific, whatever you call it, call sign. And they were Mako 30. He was Mako 30 Charlie. He was the Charlie because of the combat controller. And so John came up on the radio, I want to say maybe 10 to a dozen times, any station, this is Mako 30 Charlie. And a combat controller on another mountain heard him. And he had worked with John. He knew John's voice. He knew how he spoke. And he would respond, and just for whatever reason, John either couldn't or didn't respond back whenever Jay answered him. So, and that was after the guys left. So there's that proof. There were just little things that started coming out, like his body was found not where the team leader said that he left them. And so Neil's body, they had a few hours with him, and so he was stripped of most of his clothing, and he was, they did things to him. John didn't have any mutilation. He wasn't stripped. They didn't have time. So I'm thinking, okay, they had this time between when the SEALs left and the Rangers finally came in after the QRF. They would have done the same thing to John, and he was not touched. So, in my mind, I'm like, they didn't have time to do it. So, there was just a lot of things that didn't make sense. And then the lies, well, I checked him. Well, how did you check him? Well, I rolled over him. And then, then it was, well, I checked him. I checked his pulse. Or, there was a laser, a stupid story about a laser from his weapon laying on, first it was moving and then it wasn't moving. I mean,
so the story kept changing,
stupid.
Basically. Yeah.
And they were pretty stupid. So, it's like, we're not dumb,
Right.
So it started coming out a little bit at a time. And, I got married to Kenny, and he got to see both sides of losing a troop, and then seeing the pain of the family. Like, he lived both sides, and we were talking, and we tried everything we could back in, I want to say 05, 06, to get him, get his Air Force Cross upgraded, or at least looked at for an upgrade. Right. And we just kept getting shot down immediately. And we're like, okay, there's something going on here, that it's this fast. And so John had a ship named after him in, I want to say it was 06, and General Jumper was there, and Jumper knew that Kenny was married to John's sister. And so Kenny went up to him and said, hey, what do you think about looking into having this upgraded to the Medal of Honor? And Jumper said to Kenny, again, knowing that he's married to John's sister, the Chapman family has been very easy to work with, so let's not make waves.
Wow.
That to me was like,
yes,
full confirmation that there's more,
And then that's, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So that's almost in a nutshell that it's all because they didn't want this incident looked at. That's the whole reason, right? Why the Medal of Honor upgrade was not happening, why they were just stonewalling you, because they did not want eyes on any scrutiny on what really happened, right?
Right. And they is not the Air Force. They in the SEALs. Mm-hmm. They did not, because for them it's all about the brand. They, we are Navy SEALs, and which is completely not true. Mm-hmm. They're human beings, and they always make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so, as from a family perspective, and I think I feel like I speak for pretty much every family who's lost someone in war or not. Just all we want is the truth. Yeah. Tell us the truth. If our person, male, female, whatever, if they screwed up, then we want to know. Right. If he or she was a hero, we want to know that too. We don't want it to be suppressed. Neil Roberts was a hero. They didn't even celebrate their own guy, because in doing so, it would have. It blows my mind that the people that they don't care who they hurt, as long as it keeps their brand, shiny. I don't know. Yeah. And the American people are so gullible, everybody's like, oh, well, they're Navy SEALs, so they would, or military. It doesn't even have to be SEALs. Sure. So they're above board and they would never lie. I mean, look at Pat Tillman's family. They were lied to, right. It's just tell us the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. You, in undertaking all of this, and just being exposed to it and then advocating the way that you have, that obviously must have drawn so many more, military families who went through or are going through similar, things as this. Did you find that there were a lot of people coming to you and saying and sharing their own stories and sharing their own questions and asking maybe even for your help in, righting these grievous wrongs?
I didn't really get, I entered or joined a Facebook page that was Gold Star Siblings for a while. And there were some sisters who reached out to me, with different grievances, some of it with whatever branch it was that their sibling was in. Some of it had to do with more personal things like what do you call it? PNOK. The primary next of kin, which is at the ones who came to me were the ones who had spouses, who had in-laws, sister-in-laws, and how they were treated in that respect. So, that was a big thing for on that site. But I didn't really have a lot of people. I mean, because I was still fighting my fight, and sure. And a lot of them, I think they just accepted what they were told, and I don't know. I feel like there are a lot out there whose story is not quite what you think it is.
Yeah.
I feel like they lie about it for no apparent reason. Like it's just like the knee-jerk reaction. Like you heard about things in the Vietnam, or somebody went off the reservation, but the family was told, well, he saved a whole platoon. And it's like, just tell the truth.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I can certainly see, I can certainly understand families just wanting to take the best possible version and leaving it at that. But, there's people like you and your mom that are, truth comes before everything. And, and it's really a testament to your fortitude and my gosh, especially your mom, as a mother, to hear those things. Again, I always put myself in that mindset of how would I feel? How would I react? What would I think? What I do? None of us know, certainly for real, until they're faced with it. So I commend you so much, because there are other families and other military families who have had that gut check as well, that said something's not right here. And I think your story and the way that you have handled this and pursued this, I think it is such an encouragement and almost like a guidebook of how to, right? To be like, okay, wait a minute, this is the steps that they went through. These are the things that they said and did. And, and really just putting the pressure on and putting the spotlight on. And obviously that tenacity, that perseverance, it finally paid off with that deserved Medal of Honor. Take me through, if you will, that how just the feeling, the emotions of that, the everything of getting finally that for John.
So, just so everyone knows, our efforts to get his Air Force Cross looked at for the Medal of Honor went nowhere. We had nothing to do with him ultimately being awarded the Medal of Honor. What happened was back in, I want to say 2014-ish, then Secretary of the Air Force, Deborah James, was reading an article in the Military Times or Air Force Times that asked, what does an airman need to do to receive the Medal of Honor? Because there hadn't been one since Vietnam.
Wow.
An airman, not like a pilot or anything.
Sure.
And so she said, let's find out. And so she tasked her people with finding, I don't know, 10 or 12 names of people who had been awarded something, but maybe it should have been the Medal of Honor. And John's name floated to the top. And so then ultimately he was chosen as the one to let's prove this, let's make it happen. And so then the process went on from there. And the SEALs, they tried everything they could do to squash John's medal, like everything they could think of, and when it didn't work, they decided to. So there's a whole big thing. So yeah. Rob Harrison was in the AC-130 that was flying overhead and recording. So he was an ear and eyewitness to the whole thing. And he was on the Medal of Honor task force to prove the medal. So he knew everything that was going on. And he was in a room. They were in a meeting that was here, we're just going to show you this. We don't have to do this. We're just going to do it anyway, just so you know what we have. And even in the meetings, they were, like that didn't happen that way. Or when he said, we're talking about John and his call sign, and they're like, hey, didn't you use that call sign? Yeah, I think I used that call sign too. Like, no, they didn't, but they were already doing that. And then, at some point in time, this Jeremy Williams was I don't know if he was a commander. I don't know what he was. As far as I'm concerned, he was just a turd. But he leaned back and looked at the team leader and said, well, we should just put you in for the Medal of Honor, which is what they ultimately did. Wow. And so, yeah. If you read his citation, the actions that he's credited with on his citation were actually John's. So if you look at the that was another thing. What happened, how John was actually awarded it was because, so there was a CIA drone flying overhead when the battle happened. And then there was the AC-130 flying overhead. Mm-hmm. Well, when, and we knew there was a video, but no one we couldn't see it for years. And then the Medal of Honor group was able to take the video. So there were some gaps in the CIA drone video, because I guess probably because they were circling. So there might be some gaps. Well, the AC-130 had their video and they were able to fill in the gaps like this, because however it happened, they were still able to see the entire thing. And so that's how they had the video to prove. John was the first Medal of Honor with video proof, and he ended up being the first enlisted Air Force Medal of Honor since Vietnam. But so, I mean, it just took a lot, and they all tried to. So when John was awarded the Air Force Cross, they had three after action reports, or three eyewitness statements is what it was, by three teammates for the Air Force Cross. They weren't signed because they were downrange or they were somewhere, so they were electronically sent. So they weren't like physically signed. The Air Force asked them to sign their statements from the Air Force Cross thing, and they refused to sign them. Like, no, I'm not signing them. There were just so many things that they did to try to. He went against orders, and he did this and he did that. He saved your lives, people. He did what he was supposed to do. He attacked the attackers. Yes, he was a combat controller. Yes, he was supposed to call in airstrikes or set up comms, but that wasn't the mission at that point in time. The mission was finding Neil, and even if John had to set up comms, he had to reach higher ground. He had to do something other than staying there and fighting with the helicopter. He had to move to higher ground anyway. So everything that they've said is just fiction, bullshit, really. And yeah.
Yeah, you have been so fearlessly bold in calling out by name these people who really did a disservice, more than a disservice. That's such an understatement to your brother and to your family and to his memory, and against their own honor, really. I'm curious, have any of them ever responded or reacted to you publicly or privately, positively or negatively, in response to any of this?
Well, I don't know. I guess we haven't talked about the museum thing, but so I have this Navy SEAL. So I say turd because in their community, that's a really bad thing to be called. And so, but I really truly believe that these people are certain ones. So there's a Navy SEAL in California who's trying to make a documentary of the fiction, and he's been trying to get in touch with me for his own nefarious reasons. Get me on video, get me on tape saying something, and then he can say, well, John's sister actually talked to me, or or he could take what I say and twist it and
right.
edit it or whatever it is. So he's tried, and I did talk to him a couple years ago when I had no clue, and I just told him back then, I don't trust you. You're a Navy SEAL. He even admitted, I might have a slant towards the Navy SEAls. What you think? So he was just a lapdog for the other guys, for the higher up dudes that are pulling the strings. And I'm not afraid to say their names because they have to be spoken because we're not the only family that has been affected by these people. Yeah. 10 years after John, Commander Joe Price was murdered. He was a commander of SEAL Team 4. He was murdered by his own men at the order of someone who was also involved in John's, Tim Szymanski. He was the one who forced the mission for John, and he was the commander or above Commander Price. So this has to be stopped. People have to know their names. They have to hear the stories of all these families who are destroyed because of this faction of evil, corrupt Navy SEALs. Logan Melgar was murdered by Navy SEALs, and everybody knows that he was murdered, and yet nothing happened to these guys. Initially the Army was investigating that, and they said, well, it's because he found out that they were stealing money from they're sent over with a whole bunch of money, that they were stealing money. And then the Navy took over the investigation, and all of a sudden it was a hazing accident gone wrong. And so nobody got, and it's like, it's just disgusting, and it has to stop. And I feel like the only way for it to stop is to start saying their names. The guy, John's team leader, Britt Kelly Slavinsky, is, he has a big hand in what happened with the Medal of Honor Museum. I don't know how,
that a little bit, please.
I just don't know how they sleep at night. They have no souls. I pray it, and it's hard for me to pray for them, but I pray that God enters their hearts and their souls or helps them regain their souls. Because if he's in their hearts, they can't be doing what they're doing. Yeah. One of them, a different guy, Navy SEAL, said, "Oh my God, he said he invoked God," and I'm like, if you truly had God in your heart, you could not do what you're doing. Yeah. So, and it's very hard for me to pray for them, but I do. I pray that God helps them wrench their souls back from the devil. And I know there's some people out there who will probably be like, "Oh, she sounds like a crazy nut," but I truly believe that, if they had God in their hearts, they couldn't do what they're doing.
I think personally, as a Christian, I think that is probably one of the hardest things to do, which is, instead of cursing the people who have done you wrong or done grievous wrongs, instead of cursing them, to pray for them. I find that to be one of my greatest challenges, and I commend you so much for digging so deep to find that ability to offer that kind of grace when the us in us would rather punch him in the face. Let's call it what it is. We'd rather punch him than pray for
that's
him.
Exactly what I said. I love to throw punch him. And don't get me wrong, I definitely and I had to talk to my pastor about this because I was so conflicted. I don't know how to forgive. I'm not there. I don't know if I'll ever forgive, but I can still pray for them. Yeah. and I was conflicted with trying to find that, but also really feeling the need to continue to tell the story, because more families are being destroyed because of them. And so I feel like there's not just this for me to pray for them or try to find some kind of forgiveness, but it's also, I don't know why. I've asked God to make sure, am I on the right path? Am I supposed to be doing this? And I've never had a no. So, my pastor was like, you can have the two things can coexist. You can want to speak the truth and try to forgive them. You can do the both.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really conflicted about all of it.
Yeah. And I think that is more than okay. That's so human and understandable. And I think the biggest takeaway from everything that you just said was your desire to kind of reconcile those feelings and to, still power through all of that, which makes us so human and ourselves, and bring that faith into it and ask God, to work through you, to help you through that. And I think that's so incredible. And, it's funny. One of the last questions I was going to ask you, I'm going to read it anyway. I was going to say, if John's story helps reshape how we honor fallen heroes or hold certain leaders accountable, what kind of change would you most want to see in the next few years? And I feel like you partly answered that already. It's, it's the transparency and bringing to light the things that are in the dark, and then your grace part. Speak a little bit more and better than I did on that, please.
Yeah, so like I said, the truth just needs to be told. Just good, bad, ugly, whatever. Just tell the truth. It's just let's just stop. And then they always get caught. Pat Tillman, they finally got caught. You're lying. All these other stories, you got caught. You're lying. Like, can we just stop? Mm-hmm. But there also has to be. And I don't know how this happens. And I know there were people within the SEAL community, and I'm not saying that the SEAL community is the only community that has bad actors. I'm not saying that. And I also am saying that not all SEALs are bad. I have yet to meet, I have two guys that I would probably trust. One I'm Facebook friends with, and one I just know. But I've been just so jaded by the whole thing that if I hear someone say, "Oh, my brother's a Navy SEAL," I'm immediately like, oh, well, then he's a piece of crap, and it might not be fair, but that's every dealing that I've had with the Navy SEALs. Even what's his name? Ryan Zinke. He's a representative from Montana. He called me I didn't tell you, he called me trying to smooth things over with the museum thing. And he was such an arrogant dick. Like he thought he was just going to swoop in there and have a phone call with me and smooth things over. And then when I got heated, I got pissed off, like, well, you're telling me that this is okay, and then he would like turn tail and ran. He's like, well, I can see you're upset. I think we should end the call. I'm like, is that what you do with your constituents? They get pissed at you, so you turn around and run. Like, that's what Slavinsky did. He turned around and ran. So apparently that's the MO for them anyway. But so I'm getting into that. But so I think I started to say, before I did the caveat of, not everyone's a bad SEAL, and not every other branch is perfect either. But I feel like the onus is a lot on each group, each branch, even just down to a small. Why would you have, everybody talks about this brotherhood, or we're this great brotherhood. Why would you want anyone in your brotherhood who could tarnish your brand, or tarnish your trident, tarnish whatever your symbol is? Why would you do that? Why would you accept that? And I know that there was somebody within the SEAL community that was trying to clean things up in SEAL Team 6, and he got ousted, and it's like, right, because there's this group that's growing stronger and has a lot of, so I don't know, if you read the book, Code Over Country by Matthew Cole, and he delves into the, where SEAL Team 6 started with Marchenko in the 70s, and talks about this Stanley Penny in one of the very first chapters and what they did to him. If you read nothing else of that book, read what they did to him. And that's the type of thing that they do for especially the weaker ones, to control them. They get them in compromising situations. They take photographs. They do the things like this. So now they own you. You either leave or you do what they tell you to do. And I know this for a fact. And there was just an article that a woman, was it Seth Atena, put out on the Substack, and where she said that, I think it was 3 things I wish I knew before my son became a Navy SEAL or tried to be a Navy SEAL. And she talks about something very similar to that, where it's like they find a way to control you. And apparently, I don't know, that's what's going on there. But so that's what I feel like each service, each group, I mean, going all the way down to the smallest group, you should be policing yourselves. Why would you want somebody bad in your group?
Yeah.
And I was trying to think about this one time, like, okay, there are brotherhoods and there are sisterhoods. And I really feel like sisterhoods, like if I was in this big group sisterhood and the 1 or 2 or 3 of them decided to do all this, hey, let's go rob banks, whatever, I would be like, oh, heck no, you're out. And not only are you out, I'm calling the police on you. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Maybe that's, well, that doesn't go. The bro code is, you know, you don't rat your people out, but well, you could at least kick them out.
Yeah.
You know, if
right.
you don't want to rat them out, kick them out. Yeah. So I feel like there has to be some kind of internal, you know, and I'm fighting this fight, I feel, almost by myself. I do have a few people in my corner, or, you know, willing to speak. And there's that too. Like, there are a lot of people who have knowledge. There's a lot of, there are people who have knowledge of the Joe Price murder, and yet they're not speaking out.
Yeah. There
are people who know how bad some of these SEALs are. I mean, I've talked to controllers, I've talked to PJs who have said, yeah, we never wanted to be deployed with SEALs because they got people injured or killed, because they call cowboy it up, you know, like we can just roll in there and just shoot from the hip. And, you know, so these people, I know they have their lives, but, you know, if all this is going to be fixed and cleaned up and, you know, wipe the tarnish off the tridents and everybody else's symbols, then they need to start from within. And start, unfortunately, with this SEAL faction, a lot of them are already retired. So, you know, what are you going to do with that? But
right.
Some of them aren't. Some of them are still active duty.
Yeah, I think a huge part of that potential for change really, maybe ironically, comes from people like you, Lori, who, you know, I would call a reluctant warrior, right? Like, this is not the role that you would have ever imagined yourself being in or playing, or even having knowledge of so many different aspects of this. But it's, you know, if I dare say, it's almost like it's the path that God chose for you to do this, because he must have taken one look at you and said, they are not going to mess with this one. So I am sending her in, and she is going to be the one to, you know, to go in there and shine this light on this dark underbelly of something the rest of us only see the shiny surface of. So again, you know I said it to you before, but I have so much respect and admiration for what you do, because I can only imagine how difficult it has been, and I'm sure it does not get easier, and I'm sure that the battle that you fight on behalf of your brother and men and women like him who have had similar things happen to them, it must be exhausting in so many ways. So I commend you beyond the words that I'm even capable of. So thank you.
Thank you. But, you know, as you're talking about, you know, back after the Medal of Honor whole thing, you know, watching Slavinsky get a medal that he didn't earn, and it's like, I had moved on. That was 2018 when that was, because he had to, that was another thing. They wanted to make sure his was awarded first, but whatever. It's all about optics and whatever.
Right.
But I had kind of moved on. I had, you know, I'm living my life. I found my own peace, and then the whole museum thing happened. And then once that came about, I just said, I'm never going away. Like, I'm just, I can't. Like, this is, it's so egregious and so disgusting that, and unfortunately, I'm like this one tiny little voice in the giant, you know, universe, and most people aren't paying attention. And, you know, it's sad, you know, there are, I think pretty much every Navy SEAL in the Congress, which I think is 5 of them, you know, they all ran on Republican ticket. Because why? Because Republicans love the military, and, you know, but, you know, and again, like you said, I know more than I wish I did. I'm not going to say all of it, but, yeah, they're not there because they want to serve the country. They're there for other reasons. And it's sad. Yeah. I don't know how we got here.
No, I know. I've said that in so many different ways, as I go on my journey here and news and reporting and all of the things, you unfortunately, you see it. You see it, and and it's that discernment that, these things, you hear and read it and see it, and it's immediately setting off those, huge red flags. Like, wait a minute, I can tell already this is not right. This is not what it seems. And, while the rest of the world is like, that's wonderful. That must
Exactly.
be true. It looks true.
Exactly.
It sounds true. They're saying it so sincerely, so it must be true. Yeah.
And you're like, no.
Yeah. It's like, no, what's wrong with you? How do you not? That discernment, man, it's a curse and a gift, isn't it? Oh,
No lie.
boy. Yeah. Lori, tell everyone where they can find the books. And if there's, we did not talk about First There Foundation. So please take a moment and share about that, if you would.
Sure. The First There Foundation was founded by a man named Eric Lionheart. He was a combat controller. I'll just do a quick, Reader's Digest version. He was retired or had gotten out, and one of his mentors and friends ultimately took his own life. And it was at that moment that Eric said, this has to stop. So he, that night, laid there and thought about the mission and everything, and then decided that the mission statement would be to help his combat control family, the controllers and their families. And so he founded the First There Foundation. And I can't remember which year. I think we're in our 5th year now. I wasn't part of it in the beginning. I didn't know him. And now he's like my brother. But so we've now branched out. So now it's not just combat controllers and their families. It's all military, law enforcement, first responders and their families, mostly to help with mental health. We do offer other things, like for the controllers when they get out, hey, how to write a resume for, the general public or civilian jobs and things like that. So, so that we're there to help. But again, mostly with mental health and different retreats to help with that. So.
I love that. Is there a website? Do you have a website? We'll put it, guys. We will be putting this in the show notes. You'll be able to click on everything and go right
for First There.
Yeah.
It's the number 1 stthere.org.
Perfect.
Yeah, firstthare.org. Yeah.
And the books are on Amazon, correct? Yeah.
Both books are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I think first Alone at Dawn, I believe, you can get it anywhere, whatever bookstore your favorite. With mine being self-published, I'm not sure if they've gone anywhere besides Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I have some on myself, obviously, because I'm self-publishing. So I'm under I've said this before, I'm under no delusion that somebody would want a signed copy of mine, just read the book. But, if anyone wanted a signed copy, it's probably best to buy it from me so I can just sign it and mail it instead of you buy it, you mail it to me, I mail it back and all that kind of stuff. But so that's where they are.
Outstanding. Again, Lori, thank you so much for sharing your time with me, sharing your story, and of course, John's story, and all the blessings in the world to you and your family and your husband as well. Thank him for his service, please. And it was so great having you on. And it was an honor and a privilege to be able to share this story with our audience. So I hope you will consider coming back again when you write your first fiction book, maybe.
I know, right?
That would be lovely. I would love that personally. So that would be phenomenal. So thank you very much. And guys, thank you all for watching. And we will see you in the next episode. Take care.
6, 7, and 8. One for teamwork. Down, up, teamwork. One for our fallen comrade. Down, up, fallen comrade. And one for our brother John Chapman. Down, up, John Chapman. Recovered.